Welcome, everyone. Good day, good morning, and thank you for joining us to this fireside chat with the CEO of Digital Frontiers, Todd Malone. My name is Tariro Nyimo, and I am the head of stakeholder engagement and fundraising at Digital Frontiers. I'll start by introducing Todd, and then we'll get into sort of like a Q&A, a fireside chat with him, and then we can have some questions from our participants. So we are thrilled to welcome Todd Malone as the CEO of Digital Frontiers, who started on the 1st of March, 2025. Todd brings a wealth of experience and a proven track record in leading global teams and driving impactful results across various sectors. With over 2 decades of leadership in international development, Todd has held key roles, including Managing Director and Executive Vice President at Broadridge Health Development, where he spearheaded the Health Development Business Unit with an annual revenue of 38 million. His tenure saw him manage over 1,000 global staff and deliver on significant projects. Todd's career is marked by his ability to forge strong relationships with governments, funders, implementation partners worldwide. His previous roles include Chief of Party for USAID in South Africa and Regional Vice President for Africa, Latin America, and Global Projects at PACT. Beyond his professional achievements, Todd is a thought leader in education, strategic business development, operations, and organizational capacity building. I hope I introduced you well, Todd. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Terito. That's a very, very generous and kind introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here today.
Okay, thank you. So we'll head straight into it, Todd. I think as a start, let's just start from the beginning. You could share a bit about your background, what led you to this point in time at Digital Frontiers.
Great. Thanks, Terito. And good morning and good afternoon to our Digital Frontiers Institute alumni. It is great to be with all of you today. I've heard amazing things about our alumni network, and I hope to get the chance to meet many of you in person or over virtual calls in the coming weeks and months. How did I get to be here? Well, as you can probably guess from my accent, I grew up in North America. I'm originally from San Francisco, in the state of California, and my parents are still there, and so I get to go visit them every now and again, and it was a great place to grow up. When I was growing up, my parents really encouraged me to kind of explore and wander around. We lived in a part of the world that there was still lots of room to get outside and go see what the world had to offer. And that was that's really in my DNA. And as soon as I left to go off to study, I just continued to kind of wander and explore and try to understand my world and the bigger world or the greater world as much as I could. And eventually that led me to South Africa. I arrived in South Africa almost 30 years ago. And I've just been very, very fortunate to have lived and worked across the continent. My family and I lived in Namibia for, I think, about 10 years. We were in Sudan, in Khartoum. We lived in Eswatini, back when it was called Swaziland. We spent a long time in Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania. And now we are in South Africa. We have been back here in South Africa, I guess, about 8 years now. And people will say, well, how did you end up in South Africa? And I kind of had an easy path back because my wife is South African. And so I'm in a household where 75% of the family are South Africans. And so me and my wife and our 2 boys live here in Cape Town. And we have really we've really tried to continue that spirit of wandering and exploring and trying to understand people and places and ideas. Um, to really instill that within our children. And so far, we'll see how it's going, but the children are 17 and 21, so they're really now kind of striking out on their own a bit more. Um, and one of the things that was quite special for us as a family is when we moved back to South Africa from Dar es Salaam. We actually did a trip from Dar es Salaam on the road through Malawi. Uh, a little bit, yeah. We spent some time in Zimbabwe. We were in in Zambia for quite a bit, and we also went back into Namibia, where both of our boys were born, and where we obviously spent a lot of time. And so we've put those things in front of our children with the hope that they will also be inspired to look at the world with unique views and to try to understand it and see how we can bring that to our lives and the work that we do. So it's really a pleasure to be back in South Africa and to be with Digital Frontiers. Thanks.
Such a global citizen you are and your family. That's so interesting. And just to know that Digital Frontiers Institute alumni, over 60% are from Sub-Saharan Africa. So your footprint there on the African continent, living in so many of the countries, is pretty interesting to us. So
Thanks.
just to now get into your leadership, you've held so many senior leadership roles. Can you share some pivotal moments in your career that shaped your leadership style?
Sure. I love that question. Um, you know, we all have these foundational experiences, and for me, early in my career, I did a lot of community engagement work, both in the U.S. As well as around the continent. I uh, ended up living in northern Namibia for quite some time, right on the border of Angola. And when I first arrived there, I expected it to be very, very different than the experiences I had in communities in the U.S. And what I found is while it looked very different, the types of buildings, the huts and the different kind of local brick construction and the way that homestead was organized, that was very different. But the more time I spent with people in the community, the more I realized that, and I shouldn't have been surprised by this, but the more I realized just the amazing similarities um, in terms of how people have to confront the complex social and economic challenges that they face. And so while I was in these communities, it really struck me that um, what I most enjoyed was engaging with people and trying to figure out what are the barriers they face, and is there a role that I can play to help address some of those barriers, whether they were structural, uh, whether they were social, whether they were economic, and work with them to figure out what's a path forward. Um, and that continues in my work today. So as I've moved into different roles and different organizations I've worked in, I really draw from those experiences. And most recently, I ran large scale HIV response work in South Africa, and even in that work, while we were scaling and we had, there was 500,000 people that we were supporting on ARVs and leveraging technology and figuring out how we can do that as efficiently as possible. Um, I was also reminded that it is about how you engage with people and try to make sure you understand what are the issues they face, and then what are the tools that you can use to help them address those challenges so that they can move forward effectively. Um, And so I still draw, as I said, I still draw on all of that today. And I just feel very fortunate to have been able to have all those different experiences. Um, and as I've worked across the continent, I've had similar experiences, whether I was in Ethiopia or whether I was in Kenya or whether I was in Nigeria or, working in, you know, uh, um, northern Tanzania or working in southern Tanzania or working out in Zanzibar. Just each place had its own uniqueness, and then uh, the similar need for engaging people in a way that really helps them to take things forward.
Hmm. So it seems like you're a person who is very used to change, and you've changed a lot. I mean, you've experienced change in different countries. And Digital Frontiers is going through some changes as well as we transition. So, what are your priorities there? And I can ask how you navigate all those changes.
Sure. Um, the thing about change is this weird balance that you need about um, when to be patient and when to move with urgency. Um, and quite often those are seen as somehow contradictory, but they're not. You can be both. You can understand that there is uh, urgent action that is required, and you have to be patient while working through that sense of urgency. And I think if you do one or the other, you can get stuck, right? If you are just moving with urgency, and you're not being patient with understanding how people navigate change, you'll get stuck. If you are only patient and don't move with the sense of urgency and the need for change, then you can get stuck as well, just being patient. And so these are not mutually exclusive. You have to do them at the same time. And so it's the same with when dealing with change, that you have to be adaptable and you have to have a clear sense of purpose, a clear mission of what it is you're trying to accomplish. And those things are not mutually exclusive. You have to have a plan and you have to adjust that plan as you move ahead. And so that's what I try to instill in the teams that I work with, to help them understand that you must be moving forward and you must be pushing and you must be constantly reflecting and thinking about how you can engage people better, how you can work better, how you can collect more information to inform your decisions. Um, and when you do those things, you can then build and maintain trust. People want to see that movement and they want to see that patience while they work through that process. Um, and so I think a lot of those things are seen as one or the other, and I think they're both absolutely necessary in trying to figure out that balance as you move ahead.
Mm. Yeah, I think change is something that people struggle with. Some are early adopters, some, take some time. And I like what you said about reflecting. It's also an opportunity to rediscover yourself, to grow. So as we move along with you on this journey, I think it's going to be very exciting as we discover also more about ourselves, as you also discover more about yourself working with the Digital Frontiers team. Now, since we're here at Digital Frontiers, maybe we can get into what excites you about Digital Frontiers, about this new role that you have, any vision, and maybe some more information and why it was such an opportunity you thought you had to take on.
Great, thanks. Um, so the thing that excites me about Digital Frontiers is that, for 26 years, 27 years, something like that, I've been living and working around the continent. And I know that Digital Frontiers engages beyond Africa, the bulk of our work is in Africa. And when I look at the African continent and I reflect back on um, essentially more than half my life, it tells you how old I am at this point. Uh, for more than half my life, this has been home. And if I look at where things were when I arrived and where things are now, there's been tremendous, tremendous progress. It is not the same continent that it was in the late 90s. It is just wholly, wholly different. And there's still a long way to go. Um, when I think about the fact that today, if you were to look at unemployment and you took a lens of saying vulnerable employment, vulnerable and unemployment, let's call it that. The rates on the continent, they vary by country, but generally it could easily be over 30%. Official unemployment in South Africa right now, I believe, is about 35%. But if you take unemployment and vulnerable employment, the numbers they're just massive. And they're it's so big that people forget that it doesn't have to be that way. And if you look at where Europe and the United States were about 100 years ago, as the Great Depression was uh, was happening around the world in the 1930s, the American unemployment rate at its highest point was 24%, and in Europe, it was around 30% in different countries. And nobody talks about the fact that if you just look at unemployment and the low rates of investment in comparison to the population size, it's almost as though it's a Great Depression in multiple countries around the continent. And so there's this need for figuring out how to solve these challenges across Africa, South Africa, and beyond. And the only way to do that is not to take time and go slowly, but for a real acceleration of impact. And when I look at Digital Frontiers, I see our work as being about impact acceleration, about figuring out how to leverage tools, particularly digital tools and the digital economy, and expand our work, expand our impact to engage more people across the continent in the economy. And we've seen that in our work that we've done in the financial inclusion space, which is really where we started out. And the 20 for Good initiative that we launched last year is really a reflection of this need. There's going to be 300 to 400 new job entrants in the African market over the next, let's say, 5 years. 300 to 400 million people. We need to figure out how do we engage them effectively so that they're prepared to join the economy. And we know how rapidly economies are changing because it doesn't seem like that on a day-to-day basis. But when we reflect back on 20 or 30 years, we know that things move very, very quickly, and we need to give people the tools so that they can engage. And Digital Frontiers, I believe, can be a very, very positive driving force for expanding economic participation across South Africa and across the continent.
Thank you, Todd. I think now I'm going to ask for participation from the audience so that you can engage with our alumni, our partners who are here. I've asked people to put questions in the chat. Please go ahead and do that. I may ask you to actually unmute and say something so look out for me picking on people. But right now I have a question from Malak and asked, do you have a plan to have on-premise training? Now we know that you have a passion for education and a background in education. This is a pedagogy kind of question.
Sure.
This is how about on bachelor's and master's degrees? Oh my God, this has a vision for Digital Frontiers Institute. Todd?
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of moving from virtual to in-person training, I don't know that that's a part of our future. There are so many people doing in-person training that I don't know that that is where we're going to add value. I think where we can add value is looking at subject areas that just aren't being addressed, or looking at populations that are not being addressed. We've done a lot of work with people in the banking regulatory sector and at central banks so that they can think differently about how they look at digital financial inclusion. And I think that's what we can do. I think not just in the digital financial inclusion space, but in other spaces. Maybe it's digital public infrastructure, but I think it's going to be other areas around the digital economy with all of the fintech adoption that's happening. I think we have a role to play in making sure that fintech does not simply recreate the barriers that people already face in the brick and mortar sectors, because this, the continent with the fastest growing mobile market is Africa. Not even
Mm.
close, right? And there are nearly a billion people that are billion SIM cards that are issued on the continent, and the population of the continent is about a billion. That doesn't mean everybody has a SIM card. As we all know, in the different countries, quite often have multiple SIM cards depending on which part of the country we're in, because the coverage varies depending on where we want to be. So we might have our Tigo SIM card and then our Voda SIM card when we're in Tanzania, depending on which part, or in Nigeria if we're up country, or if we're, in the capital, we want a different SIM. So I know that those billion SIM cards are not, does not mean everybody has a single SIM card like you have in other parts of the world. But what I'm getting at is there's so much room for figuring out how do we bring people in and engage them in ways that current education and training delivery services just are not doing. So I don't know that we're going to do in person. What I know works is this the synchronous in delivery of education. You have synchronous and asynchronous, and it just means you're online at the same time as the facilitator, or the facilitator uploads everything and then you get on whenever you want. I know that there's time for that self-study, and then you also need time together with the facilitator and your peers, and that richness that comes out as we engage one another, I think is essential. And I know that our learning facilitators and our teams design for that, and I think that's what we'll continue doing.
Mm. Thank
And
you,
thanks
Todd.
for that question. That's lovely to discuss.
Thank you. I know Fahad was asking a question about the vision, your vision of digital frontiers, but I think you covered
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And there's another question. Is it Fahad again? What's your plan on new cost development? They're really interested. These are our alumni. So what
Yeah,
is
yeah,
your
of course.
plan on new cost
Yeah.
development around digital society, digital
Mhm.
assets, areas?
Yeah.
He's
So so
bringing
I
some.
am not going to make that decision now. I'll give you some possible content that we might, some areas that we might focus on. Right now, I know there's a lot of engagement around digital public infrastructure, which is really about identity and payment systems and how those work for engaging people in the economy. Um, and I think it's a space that is ripe for engagement, both um, for users and also for those that are regulating and those that are developing these systems, because we've done a lot of landscape scoping around digital public infrastructure, and we know there's a huge trust deficit between government and citizens, and that is pretty consistent across most countries. And so people are hesitant to want to have their private information in the hands of government in a way that could be misused. And so that trust deficit is something we can't wish away. So how do we navigate that? How do we work through that? How do we make sure that governments have regulations and policies that oversee these systems, that protect people's identity so that people can participate and use these technologies? I could picture some content like that. I also know that consistently women are not as strongly represented in the digital economy. And so, how do we figure out how to get people to think through that and create systems and create processes that ensure that women are not going to be excluded on purpose or on accident. So there's going to be issues around gender, and I know our gender changemakers work it resonates with that space, and I can see that expanding more. I think there's multiple pieces across the digital economy that, as we move forward, we're going to identify gaps and identify areas where people are going to seek out more support and more training. And our DFI alumni consistently tell us that the coursework that they engage in through DFI is just tops. It's just better than anything they've engaged in. And so I think that we have that validation, and now we need to go out and take that forward.
Thank you, Todd.
Mhm.
I think we've heard a lot from you about the vision, scaling impact of digital frontiers. You talked about 20 for Good. You talked about impact on women and youth, jobs, technology, education. I think we can slow it down a little bit and get back to knowing you a little bit more. I think you can share with our alumni maybe a book that has impacted your life before we close.
Thanks. The one of my favorite books that I read was well, there was two. The one is the biography of Todd Malone, and one is the autobiography of Barack Obama. And Thabo Mbeki's by Mark Gewisser is intriguing. In this was a man who for 50 years was involved in the anti-apartheid struggle from his youngest days, and how he navigated that and the different approaches he needed to use. I think it's a great study on leadership. Later in his career, it's also a great study on how you can, kind of lose some of your focus, and your leadership style will no longer help you be successful. But his early days were really a study in the complexities of leadership and engaging people. Barack Obama's autobiography is just it's a fabulous read. And one of the takeaway lessons for that for me is this: as you move into new roles in an organization, and the higher up you go in a structure, the more comfortable you have to be with ambiguity. And his point was, when you're in a leadership role, nobody brings you easy issues or easy problems that just have a single answer. They bring you a series of options that aren't clear about which one is best, and you have to figure out what are the risks of each of those options and decide which set of risks you want to manage, because they will always have lots and lots of risks, because your teams will kind of take the easy options. Then they don't come to you with those questions. They come to you with really complex issues, and you have to be comfortable with that. And that was really striking for me, to be able to get my head around that concept.
Mm. Thank you, Todd. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your answers and giving us a chance to really get to know you, your leadership style. You talked a lot about leadership, and we're watching and learning as you lead Digital Frontiers into the future. I think we are in and we didn't get to talk about it, the landscape that we are in, the development, the landscape, and how things are evolving and how that affects the company. But I'm sure we will all feel the direction you will take us in these times. And we might actually come up on a good side. So we're looking forward to that. There are still some questions that are coming. Thank you for posting them. I think Brianna will make sure that we answer them in some way. So look out on our platforms. But I wanted to just thank everyone for joining us and coming to have this chat with the Digital Frontiers CEO, Todd Malone. You'll be getting to know him even more and more as we interact, as we have more platforms to get to know Todd better and feel his leadership style. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll meet soon on our platforms.
Great. Thank you, Torito, and thank you everybody for joining. It's lovely to spend time with you today, and I look forward to spending some more time together soon. Thanks.